how to have conversations with children about private areas. It's something that I'm always going on about. I'm often posting about it on my social media accounts. I'm often making videos about it on my YouTube channel. But if anyone was to ask me how we are to go about having conversations with children about private areas, I wouldn't really have any definite answers. Like, I wouldn't have any answers that I would feel like they are that they're sound, or that they're definite to approach this very, very difficult challenge or necessity, or, well, you know, I think we all know that it's a must do. It's just so important to get children educated on their bodies. I often hear this this response to this being, well, I don't want to ruin my child's innocence, and I completely accept that, and I understand I understand the concern there. But unfortunately, very, very unfortunately, we live in a world where children are at some risk. No child is at zero risk from adults taking advantage of them in an inappropriate way, in a sexual way. It's so sad that we live in that world, but we do live in that world. So then we need to educate children on what is allowed and what isn't allowed. We do this in very many other areas. We tell children, we advise children, maybe older children, early teenagers, maybe earlier, to say no to drugs, because unfortunately we live in a world where there are dangerous substances that you can take, and we tell children not to accept or go down those roads. We also tell children from a very, very young age not to talk to strangers. This is like a universal. I think this is done in across cultures. You do not talk to strangers. And what's the reason why you don't talk to strangers? Because they may take you away. And we're happy to give that information to the child because they need that information. Because again, unfortunately, we live in a world where people are not being kind to children and are out to get children. So we equip them with these things, the drugs and the strangers. But when it comes to sexual abuse, when it comes to children being touched in inappropriate ways, children being touched in their private areas, we don't want to give the children that education. We don't want to give the child, we don't want to equip the child with that information. Why? Why are we like this? You know, in some ways, I really feel like as adults, we're the kids. Because we're scared, we're so shy and embarrassed to talk about sex. Like, what the hell is going on? Sex being the most natural thing that a human being does. It's the reason why we're all here. It's something that we all desire. It's something that many of our decisions are adjusted for, you know, especially in your younger years, but we just won't talk about it because we're shy and we're embarrassed. It's like we're the kids, you know. So, you know, I've gone off on a tangent a little bit there, but to that innocence thing that will break the child's innocence, I think we need to start saying, well, what would happen to their innocence if an adult approached them who finds them sexually attractive and goes to touch them in inappropriate areas, or manipulates the child to touch them in inappropriate areas, and the child doesn't know the rules? The child is manipulated easily because they don't know the rules. They don't know that there are areas on their body and other people's bodies that shouldn't be touched. They know that there are, that if somebody asks them to touch them in an area that shouldn't be touched, that they're to tell someone. If they know the rules, you at least get 1% closer to it not happening. To it being stopped before it goes too far. At least 1% closer. And you want to be taking that 1%. So how are we going to do this? So I suppose one of the questions is, at what age do we start doing this? And my answer is as soon as possible. So, it's just such a shame, isn't it, that we have to do this? It's such a shame that we live in this world. But my answer is as soon as possible. And it should be a reoccurring, continuous education throughout a child's life. It's not like it's a one-time lesson. I mean, come on. It's not like it's going to... This is a difficult thing to inform a child with. So you're definitely going to speak to a 5-year-old very differently to a 13-year-old. It's a completely different conversation, approached in a different way, using different language, using different techniques. Now, maybe for the 5-year-old, it would be, you would draw a body together and you would circle the areas that are private, and then with the 13-year-old, well, you could explain a bit more about why certain areas are private and the dangers of the world and what they need to do to protect themselves. Because a 13-year-old is a young adult, right? They're growing into an adult. So the conversation is completely different. Back to the 5-year-old, right? You've drawn the picture. This is just my latest ideas in my head, because I'm trying to work this out all the time. I want to get to a stage where I'm confident with answers, and maybe they're even being implemented in the education system. There's some goals for me. There's some vision for me. Could we sit a 5-year-old down, draw a body, and circle the areas that are private, meaning that they're yours and nobody is to touch them there, or you're not allowed to, or you're not to touch somebody else's areas, those private areas on their body. Now, there's a lot of conversation about using the proper words for private parts, not to say use slang words or abbreviations or childlike words for private parts. And for me, do we need to use the correct terms for genitalia? As you wish, as you wish. But I think whether you use them or you don't, there's pros and cons, and there's intense debates to be had about that. But let's get the area sorted first, right? Let's just make them aware of the area first. So we've discussed the 5-year-old, and it's not like you're going to sit them down on a Sunday and sit with them and be like, look, I've got something to tell you. We've got something to go through. I want to do this. And you go through it, you draw the picture, and then you don't do it ever again. No. You implement it continuously. Maybe this is an exercise that you do month on month. Now, not every child is fortunate enough to have parents that care to do this. Not every family has the time to do this. So we can't just put the pressure on parents only. It needs to be on the schools as well. Teachers need to be trained in how to have these conversations. Shout out to all the teachers. Your job is difficult, and you're just doing a great thing. Yeah, you're helping bring up youth. So shout out to all the teachers. We should get them trained in having these lessons, having these conversations. How then the lesson changes over time. Let's say it's a monthly lesson, or you're doing this with your child monthly. As they grow, maybe then you do introduce the proper words for genitalia. Maybe then you do start introducing a little bit about what the private areas are for, why nobody should touch them, what to do if somebody touches them. We would have already given that with the 5-year-old and the drawing as an example. Now, something that I've been thinking about a lot since doing this project of raising awareness, because this thing has always been in my mind of how are we going to educate children, more so the youngsters, right? More so the under 10s. And I had a thought, and I want to make some more content on this. What do you think? Please let me know about this, because I may be well off the mark with this, because I may be well off the mark with so many things that I say. Yeah, because we're still trying to navigate through this thing. We're still trying to experiment and find out and test. Like some of the posts that I put out, I'm sometimes like, I'm not sure whether I've even got that correct, but let's try it. It may be a little bit wrong, but being a little bit wrong is better than not doing anything at all, right? So something that I've got in my head is, what about teaching children to wash their own private parts at the same time we teach them to brush their own teeth? So when a child can hold a toothbrush, we start teaching them to brush their own teeth, because we want them to be able to do that activity by themselves and learn about keeping your teeth cleaned, keeping your teeth healthy. This is how you brush them. This is how you wash your mouth. This is how you wash your hands. So why wouldn't we also teach them to wash their private area? Now, no doubt, they're not going to do it very well at the start, so you may have to help them, just like brushing their teeth. You may have to remind them. They may not want to do it, but with time, over time, they learn. And then really, they're starting to take ownership, control. They understand that that part is their body. And then by the time they get to 7 or 8, they're the only ones that are ever touching their private area. So then if somebody comes to groom them and starts touching their private area, something doesn't feel right for them, right? Something doesn't feel right. Could we say that, if someone else, no, let's not. So I was going to say someone else tried to brush their teeth, it would feel weird for them. Could we make that comparison? No, let's not. That's a rubbish comparison. If they're washing their own body, they're just washing their own body all the time for their whole life, right? Then nobody, even their mum and dad, are not going in there washing their private area. That's the private area. Let's make it the private area. Yeah? Because it is a private area. We don't go flashing it everywhere, do we? So even for adults, it's a private area, right? So that's just one idea that I've got, that I'm thinking about, that I may write a little bit about in posts. So when you start talking about 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, when you start talking about 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, the embarrassment of sex between adults and children, between parents and their children, between teachers and their students, the embarrassment is still there. Now we're not really talking about taking away their innocence anymore by talking to them about sex when they're 13, 14, 15, because we all remember being 13, 14, 15, and I'm talking from a male's perspective. Sex is on the mind as you start growing, right? So no longer would we say it's a problem with ruining their innocence at early teenage years. But we're still embarrassed about it. It's like we think that they're going to get this education from somewhere, and so we don't have to do it, right? Where do you think they're getting their education from sex from? Where do you think they're getting that information from? You think from a reliable source? You think from a source that you would be happy that they're getting that information from. Every child has got a smartphone. Every child can Google whatever they want. Every child has access to porn sites, infinite amount of videos. Every child is having playground conversations about sex with their friends, what their friends have done, who's lost their virginity, what he or she done, what she or he said. Loads of gossip going on in the playground. Loads of gossip going on WhatsApp groups. So the education for sex for young teenagers is coming from porn, is coming from he say, she say on the playground and on social media. It's also coming from films. It's also coming from music videos. I mean, the music videos of today would be soft porn back in the day, in the 80s and the 90s. What's being shown on general music videos now would be what was considered soft porn 20 years ago. So they are learning about sex from, and it's far from education. You know, it's far from what we want them to learn about consensual relationships, about sharing, about love, about safe sex, about connection, about exploring your sexuality, about romantic relationships. Why are we not doing that? Why have we not got systems in place to do that? Because we're adults who are embarrassed like children. Honestly, I don't. It does drive me mad in some ways that we're like this and that we're doing this. The children are ill-equipped, you know, they're ill-equipped. I've heard some stories from teachers who are doing lessons to college students and school students, and there's two ones that I'd like to say. One was where the girls in the class had said that they don't use condoms because their boyfriend's pull-out game is strong. Now, we all know as adults, there's everything wrong with that. There's another lady actually who I work with on the content I create. She's in Australia and she runs a Instagram page called Safe for Kids, and she goes around schools and speaks to the young children, and there are boys of 10 and 11 who are watching porn every night. They admit to watching porn every night. So it's happening. They're getting educated because they're curious about it. They're curious. Of course they're curious. They're young teenagers. And sex is so crazy and wild, and so they want to find out about it. So they do, but we're not doing anything about that. So what are we going to do about this education thing? Do we need videos for the children to watch with their parents? Do we need instruction manuals? Do we need... You know, I don't think relying on the education system to change is I mean, that's just going to take... the education system is so far behind the current day. It's so far behind what we need right now because it's got a time lag on it. It lags behind current society. Technology in current society is excelling so great. The education is almost old-fashioned. But as adults, we are also old-fashioned. And we're not with current times. And we're not thinking about what our children really need. And we need to break that somehow. I am in the middle of developing a video which where I'm trying to address this a little better. I'm currently in the middle of developing a video, and let me know what you think about this idea. It's a small idea at the minute. I want to create a video that shows hindsight, that gives a parent hindsight. So what I mean is, let me just explain the idea. So it would be a short film, like a 10-minute piece, and we would hire some actors, and we would have a mother and a daughter. Let's say the daughter is, let's go with 8 years old. And the mother is interacting with the daughter. She knows she should have this conversation about private areas, but she keeps putting it off. She keeps going to have it, but gets embarrassed, or it feels awkward, so she doesn't do it. She keeps going to have it, and somebody comes in the room and distracts the situation, and then she doesn't have the conversation. And the years go on, and the conversation never happens. Something always gets in the way. It doesn't get given priority. Now we fast forward 20 years, and we get the actor that was playing the mother, and we get the child who is now 20 years old, and sits her mother down at the dining table, and says, "Mum, you know what? I've got something to tell you. I'm so sorry about this, but when I was a child, I was being molested by so-and-so. It was going on for many years. It was all happening here and here and here. And I never told you because I just didn't know how to, or I didn't know that I was really supposed to. I didn't know what to do about it." That conversation would be a conversation that, as a parent to receive, would rip your world apart. You would never ever recover from that. The guilt would eat you until the day you die. And the one thing that you would be thinking about was, why the hell did I not have that conversation when my child was a child? Now that awkwardness or that embarrassment of the conversation seems so minuscule, seems so insignificant compared to the conversation that you're having at the dining table with your daughter, who is now 20 years old, 25 years old, or 30 years old. Like, there's no comparison. You'd be beating yourself up that you didn't have that conversation, right? And I want that video to be a kind of to show what can happen if we don't educate children on these things like private areas. I think to come up with clever videos that are engaging, like in a theatrical or a drama style like this, with the actors and the interaction between the mother and the child, and then the older daughter and the mother, and I think that's a way to grip people. I think having an instruction manual, or having an education guide, I just think is boring. Yeah, I just think that stuff is boring. You're going to get 10% of your viewers watching that, you know. But if you can get a gripping storyline, which people are like, oh my God, I would hate to be in that situation of that mother with their older daughter sitting down with them. I must do something about this. I'm not doing very well, am I, of answering the question of how we talk to children about private areas, and that is because I just don't have the answers. I started this video wanting to talk about different ideas, but I don't really have the ideas. The only real ideas that I've got are teaching your child to wash their private parts when they brush their teeth, just so that they, so they understand their bodies a bit better, and it's their bodies, and then it becomes a bit more alien if somebody else is touching them there. At least that would bring us one step closer to prevention. And also drawing a body with circling the private area as another step to bring us another % closer to prevention. Do you have any other ideas? I know there's lots of books out there and that are talking about this topic, but the problem with the books that I see is you've got to get the parents to buy the books. You've got to get the parent to invest in buying the book. Now, they work, I know, and shout out to anyone that's writing those books. But my problem with those books is they're not going to reach as many people because the parent is already embarrassed about talking to the child about this. And so they're not really going to give their money over for a book that they're already embarrassed about. But they do work for a certain percentage of the audience, but not all. If you could get a gripping video that show this. So I don't really have the answers. I've now been talking for nearly 25 minutes, and maybe we stop there.